Hi, welcome back to Dad Knows. So if you remember last week, we talked about the Compromise of 1820, the Missouri Compromise. We had Henry Clay in, the great compromiser, to talk about that. Today we're kind of moving forward as we sort of move through American history. We're getting closer and closer to the Civil War. We're going to talk about a few of the other things that led up to the Civil War, the Compromise of 1850, some tacking on to the Fugitive Slave Act, and then the Dred Scott Decision. So we're actually going to grab Henry Clay again this week, but we're gonna drag him from 1850 instead of 1820. So he's going to be 30 years older when we get him in here. So so let's go ahead and get started. We got a lot to cover today, so we got a lot of stuff to go over. So we'll go ahead and get started now. So I'm going to go ahead and bring him in. We'll see if the timer goes. Ready? Hey, all right. And thank you for coming back. Well, I have to tell you, you're 30 years older, and you don't look like you've aged but like 7 days since the last time we had you on here. That's amazing. How do you take care of yourself? Do you have like a beauty regimen or anything you do? It's a secret. It's a secret. Okay, maybe it's the Colonel's chicken. I don't know. Maybe so. All right. Anyway, so yeah, I keep forgetting you don't know about the Colonel. Okay, so last week we had you on here talking about the Missouri Compromise. Right now, it's in 1850, and you're working on a new compromise. So what's going on with this new compromise in 1850?
Well, we acquired some land from the Mexican-American War. We decided what to do with it.
All right, yeah, so we had like the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848, acquired basically the entire American Southwest and out to California. Okay, so then now people looked at that and said, this is a whole bunch more land. When we made the Missouri Compromise, we didn't know about all this extra land, right? So now we have to decide what to do with that. So what did y'all come up with in the Compromise of 1850?
Well, so California, or would-be California, was going to be free.
Okay.
And then like New Mexico and
maybe Utah?
Yeah, Utah.
Okay.
Could like decide where they wanted to be.
Okay.
Like what they wanted to be, they could vote.
Okay, that's good. So they could pick what they were going to be, because Utah is north of Missouri for sure. So that was going to be they could decide whether they wanted to be slave or free. What about, so there were also some things like, so Washington, D.C., that's kind of in Virginia, Maryland area, those are two slave states. What about slavery in Washington, D.C.?
Oh, you were allowed to have slaves in it, but you couldn't like trade slaves around.
Okay, so you could still own slaves there, but there was no slave trade in D.C. Okay, so that was the main stuff. And then also, was there a border problem with Texas and New Mexico? Yeah, like they were going to, they couldn't decide on what the border was going to be, so you're trying to work that out, right? Okay, to get that squared away. What about the so that was part of it, and then another part of it was the like addition to the Fugitive Slave Act, because we already had a Fugitive Slave Act from the 1790s. I think 1793 sound right? All right. So what happened to kind of strengthen this new Fugitive Slave Act?
Well, we changed it to where anybody, doesn't matter where the state were, they were compelled to help with catching the slaves, and the slaves had no right to a jury trial.
So like if they thought somebody was a runaway slave, you were like required by law to help like catch them and capture them, and then they couldn't have a jury trial. So they were going to decide. I think they were going to have like federal commissioners decide it, and the federal commissioners were going to get actually paid more if they sent the people back to the slave states anyway. So I don't know how much of a compromise. Anyway, okay, so this was a compromise that y'all worked out, and I have a feeling like some of the abolitionists weren't really happy with the Fugitive Slave Act piece for sure, right? Okay, well, but it was the best you could do. All right, so well, thank you again. I think I ruined it for you last time. That I did tell you there is going to be a civil war. You haven't told anybody about that, have you? In the 30 years you've been home? Okay, I hope not. So anyway, there is going to be some war, but this does kind of just kick it a little bit further down the road, like a little bit further. So thank you so much for doing that. I want to let you get back and finish getting this compromise done, because it is important. I want you to get it, kind of push through. I know you're ill too, so you got some people helping you with it. So anyway, thank you so much, and we will send you back to 1850. All right, so we thank Henry Clay for coming in. He did have help with this compromise. Some of the other major players in it were John C. Calhoun, Daniel Webster, who was a prominent abolitionist, as well as Stephen Douglas, senator from Illinois, who is going to be a big opponent of Abraham Lincoln. So anyway, we thank him for that. We're going to have a quick word from our sponsors, and then we will we'll pick up with the other part of today's message, the Dred Scott Decision. So quick word from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. Hi, got a problem with two sides to an issue and can't work it out? Come on down to Clay's Compromising Consultants. We've been solving problems for people for years, coming up with great solutions to problems. Like some people like forks, some people like spoons, but you can only have one. How about the spork? Or some people like Colby cheese. Some people like Monterey Jack cheese. Put them together, you got Colby Jack cheese. That's right, we can solve lots of problems for you here down at Clay's Compromising Consultants. So bring your problem to us, we'll figure out a compromise. All right, thank you to our sponsors once again, Clay's Compromise Consultants, for helping us out 2 weeks in a row. We had Clay on 2 weeks in a row, so we thought we'd throw him a bone and let him have 2 commercials on you. Anyway, all right, now on to our last topic for the day, the Dred Scott Decision. So there's a lot to cover here. I'll try to be as quickly and concise as I can. So Dred Scott was a slave born in Virginia in 1799 to the owned by the Blow family. They moved him from Virginia to Alabama, and then from Alabama to Missouri, all slave states. While he was in Missouri, his owner died, and he was bought by an army surgeon named Emerson. The army surgeon then moved him to Illinois, which was a free state, and then got married in the meantime, and also allowed Dred Scott to get married while they were there. Then he moved to the Wisconsin Territory, which was a free territory. Then from there they moved to Louisiana. Then they moved back to the Wisconsin Territory. Then they moved to Missouri. Then they moved to Iowa, where Emerson, his owner, died. And then his wife brought them back to Missouri. So they're in St. Louis, Missouri. They're there for a few more years. This is like mid-1840s. And Dred Scott, at this point, he and his wife both decide that they want to try to get their freedom. There are some Missouri state statutes at the time that they're going to kind of use to argue their case. The biggest one was a state statute that said if you were a slave and you were taken to a free place, then you couldn't be made a slave again. So that's what they went with. So they filed their case. It actually got overturned on a mistrial. They had a mistrial, so they got a new trial. And the new trial, they won. Yay! In like 1850. But then that was appealed to the Missouri Supreme Court. The Missouri Supreme Court struck it down. Boo, right? So then, 2 more years later, in 1854, they have some abolitionists, again, kind of helping them, funding them with all this stuff, including their original owner's family, the Blow family. They then start a federal case in 1854, and they lose. They lose the federal court case too, but they take the federal court case to the U.S. Supreme Court. So it comes before the U.S. Supreme Court in 1856, and is finally decided in 1857. It takes almost a year to decide this case, and the Supreme Court actually sides with the owners and still says that Dred Scott is still in fact a slave. And a couple of really big things come out of this. One being that they say that Congress doesn't have the right to restrict people's property and how they and property ownership. It's against their Fifth Amendment rights. And so by doing that, they say that the whole Compromise of 1850 and the Missouri Compromise are completely unconstitutional. The other thing they say is that anybody of African descent, whether slave or free, is not a citizen of the United States at this time, and therefore they don't have the right to sue in court anyway. So it was a really controversial decision at the time. 1857. We now know we're only 3 years before the Civil War starting, so this is really setting the stage for all this compromise stuff has basically been kind of thrown out the window. Abolitionists are in uproar. The slaveholding states are really on the they're concerned about decisions that are being made. So the Civil War is just kind of barreling right at us. An interesting note to this is, in the meantime, when all this trial was being argued, the widow of Emerson, Irene Sanford, had actually married a prominent abolitionist who suddenly found himself in ownership of kind of the most famous slave in the country, who he promptly sold back to the original family, the Blow family, who then freed Dred Scott and just said, hey, you and your wife are both free. So he got to live the last year of his life as a free man, even after being denied by the Supreme Court. So anyway, that is all on that. Next week we're going to hit Manifest Destiny. We'll have a conversation about that, and then we're going to get to the Civil War. So thank you so much for joining. If you like our content, subscribe, like it, share it. Feel free to share it around, share it on Facebook, whatever you want to do. That'd be great, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much.